Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome back to the Number One Show, the show where I tell you about all the number ones jumping on points and one-shots that I read this last week and help you decide what you might want to pick up when you go to the comic book store. These are all, as I said, from last week. I am going to try to get this out every week on time, just after the books come out, and so anticipate a new episode of the Number One Show a little bit later this week. So many more number ones coming out every week than I expected when I initially decided to start doing this show, and I'm going to do my level best to carve out some time every week and get this knocked out with everything else that I'm doing. But getting a lot of good feedback on the Number One Show, and this seems to be really helpful for some people going to the shop. So anyway, I'm going to keep doing this for as long as I can work it in, and as long as there's interest. I want to say thanks as always to Elite Comics in Overland Park, Kansas for helping me out with the show. If you are ever in the Kansas City area, be sure and check out Elite Comics. They are absolutely fabulous, and we appreciate everything they do for us. I'm going to go as lickety-split as possible because I have another stack about as big as the one I had last week. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it, shall we? With a book that I had no idea was coming out, and I guess this is a whole line, and I didn't even realize this. It's What If Infinity X-Men #1, the third in the What If Infinity line. I'm still baffled by the fact that we're doing What If Infinity books right at the tail end of Secret Wars. I have no idea why we're doing this and what this is about. It really feels like a thing that meant to come out a long time ago and is just now coming out. If anybody knows the story behind this, let me know, because I have no idea what's going on with this. So this is Joshua Williamson again, with art by Mike Norton, and it's just okay. Just like the other two What If Infinity books, I wasn't real in love with it. It is fun to have What If again, but I'm not finding these especially captivating. This is, the premise here is, what if the X-Men were the sole survivors of Infinity? And I like that idea. It's a cool premise. Basically, we took a handful of mutants, several characters that I'm not real familiar with, a couple that I've never even heard of before, like Armor, I don't know who that is, and we send them out into space, close to the Shi'ar Empire, and they are basically just trying to survive. And all of a sudden, what appear to be the Avengers show up. Oh man, what happens? And it's funny because this happens a lot with these kind of premises where it's like, what if you were the last man on Earth, and then inevitably, you're kind of like I Am Legend, inevitably you run into somebody else. What I like about it is that it unfolds more like a natural story. It takes place over a short amount of time. It's not this big expansive thing where we're trying to throw in a whole bunch of history and mythology and stuff all in one 20, I guess these days 20-page issue, but I still wasn't especially engrossed with it. I'm not real in love with a lot of these characterizations. I wish that we had fewer characters so that we could flesh some of these people out a little bit more, and I'm maybe partly just thinking that because some of these are characters that I'm not real familiar with already, as I said, but some of these ideas are good. I like the question of what are the X-Men if there are only X-Men. Like, I don't remember his name, but the leader of this team keeps saying, we're not X-Men, stop calling us that, because what really is the mutant cause if there are no humans around, if there's no opposition? They think that they are the only people left from the planet Earth, so they're not really the X-Men anymore, and now they're just nomads, trying to survive, and that could be really an interesting idea for a miniseries or a whole book. But that's the limitation of doing these kinds of things in one-shots. But anyway, it's kind of amusing because Thanos' face is on the cover, looming in the background, but he's not actually in the book. I guess he's looming in the background because he kind of started this whole thing. It was sort of his and the builder's fault and all the stuff that happened with Infinity. But anyway, as I said, kind of lukewarm response from me on this. Fun to have more what ifs, but these have been just okay. Next up, speaking of just okay, it's Star Wars Chewbacca #1. This is written by Gary Dugan with art by Phil Noto, and this was not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of raise my eyebrow at the notion of a Chewbacca miniseries and kind of feel like we're milking the Star Wars brand right now with Marvel for all it's worth, and I've been okay with that because everything's been pretty good. I haven't been in love with the Princess Leia book, but I read the first couple issues, and again, I felt the same way I did about this, where it's just okay. Worth reading, but not blowing my socks off by any stretch of the imagination. What I really like about this is that I feel like Gary Dugan is giving us a little bit of a character study for Chewbacca, and again, it's not real complex because this is not a real complex character, but it feels like he went and rewatched the original trilogy and did some research and really got himself in the mindset of Chewbacca and what would this character really be all about. Why is he such an intimidating force, but deep down he's really kind of a puppy dog? Where does all of that come from? And so what we have here is Chewbacca, who's basically fighting for the freedom to be left alone. All he wants to do is be able to laze around all day in the flowers and not have to be bothered. And then, of course, he gets bothered, and he always gets irritated when this happens, but then inevitably there's someone whose freedom is being oppressed, and he feels the need to help them because by helping them, he's helping himself, and he's also, you know, standing up for his ideology, which is, again, I just want to be left alone, and that's his big problem with the Empire, of course. Again, really simple story. Basically, there's a kid whose father is trapped in a mine, and he needs Chewbacca to come help him rescue him because he knows that the Empire's not going to care about his father and that they're just going to leave him down there to die. And so that's kind of the setup, and there's not a lot of story told in this first issue. There are exchanges, and I say exchanges, this is a lot like reading a Groot story, where your main character just has like the one thing they say, and there's a language barrier thing, and there's some comedy mileage that kind of like you would expect, that comes from that. And Chewbacca, so I say exchange, Chewbacca will growl and then somebody will be talking to him, and some of those exchanges, because we're trying to make it look cinematic like the rest of these, we're like filling the page up with larger panels than I think we need, where we could put more panels on a page and then get a little bit more story told. But I suspect that this is going to be a really simple story overall, and so to stretch it to the 4 or 5 issues or whatever it's going to be, maybe that has to happen. It's paced well, it's just the art is more spread out to me than I think it needs to be. I guess I'm a little bit lukewarm on this. I think that the characterization is really, really good and really solid, but I wasn't like blown away by it. Next up, we've got Superman Lois and Clark #1. This is written by Dan Jurgens with art by Lee Weeks. Really mixed bag, this book. First of all, I was really excited when I initially saw the solicitations for this. A Lois and Clark comic, awesome! You know, we got Batman 66, we got Wonder Woman 77, maybe they're making a comic based on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Nope! This is based on a miniseries that was tied in to Convergence over the summer, and it was one of those that I didn't read. I kind of wish I had now, not that I feel like I need it to understand what's going on in this book, but I guess it was somewhat critically acclaimed. A lot of people really liked it, and so they decided to make a whole book about it. And basically the idea, what you do need is, maybe you don't have to have this, but I think you'd appreciate it more, is a little bit of knowledge of 90s Superman, because of course that's why we've got Dan Jurgens writing this. Basically the idea is we are exploring the darker, more cynical world of current DC Comics through the eyes of a remnant from DC Comics past, which is immediately a really interesting idea. It's this weird deconstruction of the very fabric of the publisher that's making this book and how they're approaching things now, which is it's somewhat astonishing to me that the editors let something like this pass, especially because there's been you know, the reins have been so tight. And basically, what we have here is a Superman and a Lois Lane that are married, and they are the pre-52 versions of these characters who have been, because of the events of Convergence with Telos and everything, they've been thrust into our universe, into what's basically the newly revamped 52 world. And they're trying to find their place within it while staying hidden, because they don't want anybody to know who they really are. And they, you know, took a different name. They decided to call themselves White instead of Kent, of course. And they discovered that that was a really good thing, because of course, while they've been here, Superman's been outed. His secret identity's been outed, and so Superman's having to watch all this happen to his counterpart. And like I said, they're baffled by this new world, and how people don't trust each other anymore, and how dark and brutish all the superheroes are. And there are a lot of callbacks to 90s stuff, and even a little bit before that. There is a lot of forced exposition, and a lot of your kind of like early 90s really ham-fisted dialogue, and I'm of two minds about that, because if this Superman comes from that world, then it kind of makes sense that they would talk that way, and yet it is kind of distracting and a little bit cumbersome. So I don't know, that's weird. I love the setup for what the story's going to be. We've got Hank Henshaw, who of course in the other universe becomes Cyborg Superman, who's going through the same kind of spacecraft crash that he went through in the original continuity, and the question is he going to turn into Cyborg Superman? I mean, like, is he going to go the same direction? And so Superman is kind of getting in the way of this, and trying to kind of circumvent that from happening, or that's probably where it's going. Basically, he's just investigating to see what happens. I also like that he and Lois both still can't help but be who they are, despite the fact that they're hiding. So Lois is still an investigative reporter, but she's not working for anyone, and she goes by an alias, and she publishes books. And anyway, there's a lot of presentation stuff I have with this. I know a lot of people don't like Dan Jurgens' writing, and if you don't usually like his writing, you probably won't care. But the plotting is really good, and a lot of the character stuff is cool. And I don't know, I will probably continue on this book, just because of you know, I'm a sucker for Death of Superman stuff. But also, it's really neat to see the 52 kind of, you know, revamped 52 through the lens of you know, original DC. Anyway, I'm gonna go a little bit faster. I had a lot to say about that book. Here comes, let's go to Marvel. Here comes Uncanny Avengers #1. Boy, I don't know how I feel about this yet. This is written by again Gary Dugan, with art by Ryan Stegman, and I'm having a really hard time getting my mind around this idea that Captain America trusts Deadpool. That's my big thing with this book, is that we have another new team of mutants and humans combining, but we've also added an Inhuman now, because that's the direction we're going now. We're trying to kind of supplant the X-Men with Inhumans and put them more in the forefront. And this is an interesting team lineup. We've got Rogue, we've got the Human Torch, whose new costume is really generic, and I don't like it at all, and I don't know why that's what it looks like, but okay. And Spider-Man's on this team, but Spider-Man is and Quicksilver's here, who has just learned that Magneto's not actually his father, because again, we've got to distance ourselves from all that stuff so that it looks more like the movies. Anyway, I'm a broken record. So Spider-Man is here too at first, and I don't know if he's going to stay on, because a lot of what this book is about, this first issue, is about how Spider-Man doesn't want to be on a team with Deadpool. And if it's weird that happens in the first place, because it seems like this team is all put together at once, and Spider-Man agreed to join it, but then he immediately leaves. Like, did he not know Deadpool was going to be there, or is Deadpool just like crazier than he realized? I don't know why he even agreed to do it in the first place, because of the way he responds to it here. And I understand why Spider-Man doesn't like or trust Deadpool. Obviously, nobody should, but it feels like a little bit of an arbitrary choice where like, why isn't everybody else reacting exactly that same way? And you know, there's some dissension in the ranks and some more, you know, questioning that after, you know, as Spider-Man is trying to leave, but it just seems like a thing that anybody could have said, and it's like, we picked Spider-Man, you know, to be in this particular role. I mean, Spider-Man's a good choice. I just feel like, because, you know, he's not a team player, and he doesn't want to work with people who are ethically ambiguous. I get all of that. You know, there's always been, you know, a lot of Spider-Man Punisher friction, of course, but then there's Punisher friction with everybody, I guess. But anyway, but I feel like anybody could have had that. The justification for it is that Wolverine is also a killer, and Captain America found it within himself to trust Wolverine, and that more or less worked out well. This is a different case, I think. You're talking about a complete psychopath who was a mercenary, and I don't know. I'm hoping that as this continues, there's like more of a revelation as to why he's trusting Deadpool. But I don't know. That's the big thing that I'm not buying. The art is really fun. There's a lot of great action in this, and it was entertaining. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I just had a lot of questions like that kind of took me out, and anyway, I don't think overall that I'm recommending this, unless that just doesn't bother you and you like reading Deadpool no matter where he is and what the logic is behind it. But I feel like he's gonna kind of get in the way. Like, we're putting him so in the forefront. Next up, it's Spider-Man 2099, number 1. This is by, of course, Peter David, with art by Will Sliney. This is an excellent jumping on point. And I haven't finished the previous run of Spider-Man 2099, and I had no problem picking this up and jumping right into it. But if you've never read any 2099 at all, this is still a fine place to go ahead and jump in, and a really good companion piece to Amazing Spider-Man right now. And I'm getting the sense that there's this kind of spider interwoven universe that's going on between these books, where they're going to be really careful about the status quo and making all those things weave in well together, like the X-Men books often try to do. And I think that that's really cool. And despite the fact that I didn't love Amazing Spider-Man number 1 and just am not a big fan of that premise, I really like what David's doing with it. And what we've got here is Miguel O'Hara having the ability to go back to where he's from, but the future of 2099 being a complete mess. It's a dystopia, and it's like more of a dystopia than it was before. It's not like a it's not like a well put together dystopia. It's like post-apocalyptic, and and so he goes there periodically, hoping that something has changed that's fixed it, but it hasn't, and it's still terrible, and he can't live there. So he's stuck here, not because he can't get home, but because home doesn't exist anymore. And I really like that idea. I also love his perspective, because he's used to this completely corporate-led world where people don't have the freedoms that we enjoy now and are oppressed by corporations, and to him that's normal, and so the only reason that he won't go back to his future is because everything's just destroyed and in shambles. That's it. And I really like the contrast between him and Peter Parker. He's working as an executive for Peter, and Peter Parker is not really a businessman, and Miguel O'Hara is from a world that is all business, and it's really interesting to compare those two guys. Miguel O'Hara has decided that he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore, your classic Spider-Man thing, Spider-Man no more, and but he, unlike Peter Parker, or at least unlike the more seasoned Peter Parker, loves to be in the limelight, and so he goes on a reality TV show at the beginning of this, which is absolutely hilarious, and where a lot of the best action in this issue is. He never dons the costume in this issue, and I didn't mind, because it was really character-driven, really dialogue-driven, and super witty dialogue and banter all the way through this. It reminded me a lot of some of Bendis's writing, but I think that David gets even quite a bit more done in one issue than Bendis usually would. So much dialogue in this. I mean, if you don't like too much dialogue on a page, you might not appreciate this, but it's paced really well, and you don't really think about that. I think a lot happens here for your buck, and I was really, really impressed with it. Liking the status quo here a lot more, actually, than I was the status quo of the first book. I thought it took, sorry, Volume 2. I thought that it took a while to get off the ground, and this just jumps you right in, and David has a great voice for all these characters, and they all really come alive for me, and it's full of hilarious dialogue, but is also dramatic and sad in its way. Next up, the New Avengers #1. The New Avengers. This is written by Al Ewing with art by Gerardo Sandoval. It took me a few pages to really get into this because I didn't know any of these characters, and I was having a hard time getting a sense of them because there's so many thrown at you at once. And then I had to remind myself, well, it is called New Avengers. And after a while, I really started to dig this, actually. This is, basically the idea here is that there are a bunch of New Avengers that are on this Avengers Island, and they are part of this organization called AIM. I guess we have supplanted the old AIM with Avengers idea mechanics, which is really funny to me. We set this up recently, and I think that's really fun. And the idea is that they are a science cult, or at least that's what S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of thinks they are, and they're creating all these new fascinating inventions, and there's a lot of really cool stuff done with technology in this, and S.H.I.E.L.D. is keeping an eye on them with a robot version of Dum Dum Dugan, which is hilarious, and so like they're using this futuristic technology in order to try to keep a check on this island of you know, misfit scientists, basically, that are also experimenting around with advanced technology. And I'm not going to give away who the villain ends up turning out to be, but that's a lot of the reason to get this, I think. There is somebody that shows up here that couldn't have without what happened with Secret Wars, and that got me kind of excited. It's so weird because you've got you got Uncanny Avengers, which is a lot more of a mainstream type Avengers book, and I think I liked this actually quite a bit more. One thing I'm not sure about is Squirrel Girl on this team. She just, I don't know, she strikes me as kind of this book's Deadpool. It's almost like we have to have that on a team now, where you've got a character who is like out of place, lives in their own world, has almost a fourth wall breaking kind of thing. Like she sees the Marvel Universe in this totally other kind of way, and kind of brings that you know, to this. And I don't know if I need that kind. You know, I necessarily have to have that kind of blatant comic relief and everything, but it could win me over on it. Anyway, overall, this I really enjoyed by the end. Next up, we've got Sam Wilson, Captain America #1, or Captain America Sam Wilson #1. It's always weird when you look at the publishing information inside, and it takes the title that's on the front and flips it or changes it in some way. This is actually, I guess, technically Captain America Sam Wilson #1. Anyway, this has been generating some controversy since it came out because it's so political, and it's really interesting to me that the way that the point of this book is kind of being hit home by the way some people are perceiving it and talking about it and slamming it. Basically, what happens in this is Sam Wilson makes the unfortunate mistake of running for office, and he decides that he respects that Captain America was always bipartisan, and he always felt the need to not get in the middle of politics. He wasn't political. He didn't talk about politics. The things he said certainly would give you a clear sense maybe of what some of his politics were, but he didn't side with one side or another on a lot of issues. He simply fought for his country. And Sam Wilson, because this is all about how divided the country is. This is, by the way, really heavy stuff about what's going on right now in the real world politically, and if you don't like that in your comics, you're not going to enjoy this. It's a thing that I still somewhat resist to a point. I think that it is very much from a character place, and I liked that about it. Sometimes it does get a little bit too heavy-handed for my taste, about just, I'll just say it this way. By the way, Nick Spencer with art by Daniel Acuna. It's very clear, or at least it sure reads this way. I could be wrong. Of what a lot of Spencer's politics are, and kind of comes from that side of a lot of issues. It could be that moving forward we play both sides a little bit more. But I'm just saying that it is a very, very political book and not an allegorically political book. But I don't know. A lot of the writing is really sophisticated, and it was certainly, you know, thought-provoking, and I enjoyed it. Wilson is between a rock and a hard place because he feels like he has a duty to stand up for what he believes in. So he runs for office and he has to choose a side. He picks a ticket, and half the country is for him and half the country is against him because we're a divided nation now. And so he gets because he puts himself out there like that, and also I like, by the way, all the commentary about social media and about you know, the mainstream media, and how words that you say can get twisted and turned around on you, and if you're a public figure, no matter what you say, it can and will be held against you. And so that's kind of what's happening to Sam here, and I find him really sympathetic, and he's still, you know, trying really hard to fight for what he believes in and continue to be Captain America, but he has been basically banished from S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers and all these organizations, and so he has to kind of work for himself and pull together his own team, and he has no money, and so we have an estranged Captain America here, which is really interesting. Overall, I definitely recommend this. I really sympathized with Sam in this, and I'm very, very interested to see where it continues to go. Next up, we've got Radioactive Spider-Gwen #1, with writing by Jason Latour and art by Robbie Rodriguez. Oh man, did I love this! First of all, the title is fantastic. Radioactive Spider-Gwen. Why have we never had a Spider-Man title with radioactive in front of it? That's awesome! I was so happy with the direction this went because there was a lot of fear that and by the way, I should say that I've read only a couple of issues of Spider-Gwen and then seen her on some teams in some different tie-ins for Secret Wars and other things, Spider-Man, or not Spider-Man, what is the Spider-Verse, and stuff like that. So I've not read everything from her universe, but man, her universe is intriguing. You know, we had the evil Daredevil and all of that. It was just some really cool reinventions of characters. And a lot of people were kind of afraid that with Secret Wars, this would be Spider-Gwen in our universe, and that's no fun, because what was cool about Spider-Gwen was getting to see her in her own element in this world where all of these characters are in different places, and what's cool is they're not different people, it's just what would they be if the circumstances were different. So you know, you have this scary notion that that if things had been different for him, for instance, Matt Murdock could have gone evil and become the Kingpin. And then you watch the Daredevil TV show, and it's all about that, about how he and the Kingpin are basically the same guy, but they allow themselves to make choices where they pick the clear sides, and this kind of feels like it's subtly sort of about that kind of thing, where we're not just reinventing characters and saying and rolling a dice, this guy's going to be evil, this guy's going to be good. It's about the circumstances. It's about the background, and the question of just how much control do you really have over your own destiny, or is everything circumstantial? And anyway, we are still in that world, and that is so cool, especially because of some of the revelations here. We have, and I don't think this is giving anything away because I think this was already there from before. And by the way, this is, even though it's a #1, it is just the next story arc in this series. It's like nothing changed, and we've had that with a lot of these, which is really exciting. Having said that, I think it's an okay jumping on point, but it does kind of read just like it's the next story arc in this series, and you really probably do want to go back and read the rest of it. But it's so much fun, and Spider-Gwen is so likable and spunky and real that I don't know. I think it would get you through it anyway. But anyway, so I don't think this is giving too much away because we had it in a previous arc, like I said. But we've got Frank Castle leading the police force, and Captain Stacy answers to him, and I think that's really cool. We don't get to see much of him in this, but just that as an idea is neat. We are exploring what exactly happened to Peter Parker, and we are doing that through an old major Spider-Man villain, and well, I guess that's kind of in the front, so I guess I can go ahead and talk about that. It's about the Lizard, and that is intimately connected to what happened to Peter Parker, and it's fascinating. Don't want to give too much away about this. It's still just super stylistic. I love the colors in this book. I love the frantic nature of it. I love how many panels we sometimes will put on a page. The variation of panel layouts. Like I said, the weird contrasting color schemes. This is just so much fun, and everything that a lot of us liked about early Spider-Man, where it is about this teenage, in this case a girl, but about a teenager who is trying to find her place and who has these powers, doesn't really know what to do with them, and trying to be responsible with them, but sometimes messing stuff up. And it's just so classic Spider-Man in that way. I really, really like it. Next up, oh boy, this is out there. We've got I Hate Fairyland, #1, written and drawn by Scotty Young. This is gruesome, this is brutal, it's also one of the most imaginative things I've read in a long time. The premise here is basically, what if the generic little girl who goes to some kind of a fairyland, be it like Oz or like Wonderland or wherever it is, what if everything in the rosy, bright-colored, happy place was as scary to her in the first place as and freaky and weird as it really is, as it really looks. So, and what if the laws of physics more or less work the way that they do in real life? So basically what happens is this little girl, just like Alice in Wonderland, falls down a hole and lands in Fairyland. But she gets like hurt really, really bad because it was a long fall. And from then, it's just that she got off on the wrong foot with Fairyland. And the longer she's there, the more completely insane she gets. And she absolutely hates this place, and she goes around and just tries to kill everything. And it's this really disturbing kind of take on what fairy tales might really look like from the perspective of someone who is psychologically affected by the absolute bizarre nature of them. And this is not for your kids, not even a little bit. Maybe teenagers, if you're okay with them seeing a lot of blood and guts. This is a really colorful, wonderfully detailed book. It looks all whimsical and harmless, and then guts and slashing and chaos. And I liked this. It bothered me, I guess, in the way it was supposed to, but it was also just so wonderfully clever, and and he just nails a lot of like the weird, bizarre fairy tale stuff. I love Scotty Young's choices in language, where he puts in a lot of like Dr. Seuss-esque vocabulary, and he just throws it in there and doesn't explain it, and it's just the vernacular of these characters. It is super ultra violent, but then there's kind of at least in, you know, there's a satirical point to that, and I don't know that gratuitous is the right word, but it kind of is that, but in a way it sort of gets away with it. This is not for everybody. There is, again, this is a kind of disturbing satire, and Scotty Young has this wonderful letter in the back that's worth reading, where he talks about how this is his dream come true, where he's worked for freelance for Marvel and other places, but what he always really wanted to do was publish something for Image, and he finally got his wish, where he says he didn't grow up with traditional superhero comics. He grew up with the Image stuff, and he also grew up with Mad Magazine, which explains everything now about his art. But if you really love Scotty Young, obviously you owe it yourself to pick this up. This is classic Scotty Young artwork in a really bizarre, twisted kind of world. Next up, it's the Twilight Children from Vertigo. We've got a really classic type Vertigo story here. Twilight Children #1. This is written by Gilbert Hernandez with art by Darwin Cook, and this is a really simple, haunting, spooky story set in a really kind of innocuous setting, which kind of makes it more eerie. Basically the idea here is that there's this fishing village. I think we're in Mexico. There's a fishing village, and there's this weird, mysterious, bright light ball that keeps showing up and taking people with it, and nobody understands what it is, and they just kind of accept it and they just live with it and try to move on. And that's kind of the big mystery, is what that is. There's a twist at the end that gives you kind of maybe a little bit of a sense of what is going on with that, maybe, but it kind of just makes you ask more questions than it answers them. And this is a lot about the way people treat children, how adults raise their kids and how they deal with kids and the consequences to doing that wrong. There are a couple of characters here that are super flawed, make giant mistakes, but I still kind of care about them, and it's not melodramatic about that. I think that there are some wonderful subtleties in the characterizations. I think that these people are made very real. There is a kind of typical like love affair plot that could get worked out to become something more interesting as it goes along, but right now seems kind of typical to me. But that's really the only complaint I had about it. I think that again, it's a really subtle thing. I could totally see this being a thing optioned for a movie or a film. I mean, sorry, movie. Those are the same thing. Kind of a movie or a TV show, and it reads really well in comic book form, I think, as well. Next up, it's Lumberjanes Beyond Baylief #1. This is written by Faith Aaron Hicks with art by Rosemary Valerie O'Connell. I liked this quite a bit. This is a nice one-shot kind of story. I don't know if this is the beginning of a series or if this is just a one-shot, but it reads as a self-contained story. You don't need to, there's no commitment. You don't have to read anything after it, but you also don't need to know anything from before it. I've never read Lumberjanes at all. I was immediately immersed in this and understood what was going on and what the premise of it was within 2 pages. I think that Hicks is effortless about that, where there's no recapping, there's nothing like that. She drops a couple of things in dialogue in a very natural way that let you know what these girls are doing, that they are kind of like Girl Scout-esque adventurers. They like to go into the woods and see what they can see, and they have in the past run into a whole lot of supernatural forces, and in this particular story, they are running into ghosts, and one of them doesn't believe in ghosts, and the rest of them are like, what? We've run into things a lot weirder than ghosts. And we've got a really whimsical adventure here, but that also has some kind of poignant stuff here and there in it, and a sympathetic villain, and there is and there's like a ghost horse species, and then they run into a ghost horse and we find out that she is the last of their kind, and that's super sad. And I don't know, I really like this. I think this is a great thing for teenagers. I think it's a great thing, but it's fun. It's fun to read for anybody, I suppose. It has a lot of the same sensibilities as Steven Universe, and the art is a lot like Steven Universe. Really exaggerated facial expressions, really exaggerated reactions to things, but it's consistent about that. And I got used to it. It didn't take me out. I thought that was ultimately fine. And I don't know. It's a really kind of like contemporary Nancy Drew type thing, and reminds me a lot of like some of the young adult book stuff that I was seeing when I was a kid that all the girls were reading that I wouldn't have thought to read. But this is, you know, it's a book about a group of girls. The villain is a girl. There are no men at all in this, but I don't think it's just for girls. I think anybody can read and enjoy this and relate to some things in it. I guess the only complaint I would have just reading this one story and not knowing anything about the rest of them is that there's not a whole lot of differentiation in the characterization of each of these girls. They are sort of interchangeable for me as I'm reading this, but as I said, this is my first introduction to this, and it might read very differently if I was already familiar with these characters. What else have we got? Just a couple things left from Dynamite. It's A Train Called Love. This is written by Garth Ennis with art by Mark Dos Santos. If you love Garth Ennis, you will love this book. I am not always a big fan of Garth Ennis' stuff, and this just wasn't my bag. It didn't really appeal to me overall, but there is some really good there's some really good ideas and some really good characterizations in this. It's just a lot more vulgar and profane than what I usually like to read. So just so you know, this is another very, very mature thing that's about really mature themes. In my opinion, a lot more vulgar in the dialogue than it has to be, but it is at the same time a really heightened, exaggerated kind of piece, and maybe that's all on purpose. I hate to think that it's just for shock factor, because I don't think it would shock anybody that would actually pick this up, especially if you're familiar with Garth Ennis. So it kind of just reads par for the course in that way, but it is nothing if not unpredictable. This is basically Garth Ennis on the page creating situations. In my opinion, just reading it, this is what it read like, and I don't know if I'm right about this, but it read like Garth Ennis just venting frustration about certain issues going on in the culture right now, and it's very clear, and I said this about another book earlier, you know, like how he feels about certain hot button topics through this, and yet there is definitely a heightened degree of satire about that stuff. He writes about sexism, he writes about racism, but then curiously, and I don't want to give anything away, there's a scene where I felt like he has a woman, right after dealing with a really surprising and kind of darkly funny way, dealing with a pervert that's after her. He has her do the single most bizarre thing and last thing on earth I would have ever expected her to do, and I really questioned it, but I can't really talk about it without really going into the thing. But but I don't want to take it too seriously, because I don't know that it's meant to be taken seriously. I think it is like dark humor. There's a thing with the KKK that I think is supposed to be kind of played for laughs, and toward the end, it starts to, it's called A Train Called Love. It starts to turn into a really odd love story between a mercenary and this random girl with a baseball bat. But anyway, I don't want to give too much away about this. And as you can tell, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I really think about this as I'm talking about it. The more I talk about it, the more I think I liked it, and the more I think I'm starting to maybe kind of get it. And I mean, like, there is some definitely real crazy, absurd stuff that goes on in this. Once again, though, if you're a big fan of Garth Ennis's like darker, more creator-owned stuff, you will, I'm sure, be very happy with this. Finally, a fascinating book from a publisher I'm not familiar with called Black Mask, called Clandestino, and this is written and drawn by Amanke Nahalpan. I'm sure I have completely butchered this guy's name. This is a really interesting start to a book that is, first of all, drawn in a whole bunch of different styles and all by the same person. He has a letter in the back where he talks about how it took him years and years to finally get this made, and he started back in '09, and I believe him. It's really cool that he was able to get this published. He sounds like a brand new writer. He was just a few years ago just working like a regular day job in retail. Now he's got this book out, and it is absolutely gorgeous. What we have here, first of all, it is super, super brutal. It's another really, really ultra mature book. I think that the violence is ramped up maybe more than it has to be to tell the story he's telling, but then he wants the violence to be scary and awful because of the themes and the heavy stuff that he's dealing with. As I said, this is, I'm jumping around, this is a story drawn in a whole bunch of different styles, and you know, it starts with a really, you know, modern looking really gritty kind of you know, contemporary style, and then it goes to a more noirish looking thing when we go back to the 70s, and then when we get into some of the war stuff, it starts to look like Apocalypse Now, and I really like the lack of consistency in the different art styles used to represent different moods and different time periods, and within them it's definitely consistent, but this guy is demonstrating his versatility in spades, and I'm really impressed with it. This is a book that is all about a revolution. It's about this made-up country in South America that has an oppressive government and a rebellion that in the 70s rose up, and now in present day they're trying to keep it, and it's very difficult, and it's very violent and bloody, and it deals with a lot of, again, real-life politics, but I really like that it's in this fictional setting, and this is not exactly my cup of tea, but I was really impressed with it, and I think that if you're really into these kind of international stories, and you know, you like you know, political commentary in your comics, once again, this is another one for you. A lot of political commentary going on in comics this week. Everybody, thanks as always for watching. Sure appreciate it, and would love to hear what you thought of some of these books, if you read any of them. Hope this helps you decide what maybe you might want to pick up at your comic shop, and I know it's been a few days since these came out, but a lot of them, I'm sure, are still gettable. Thanks again to Elite Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. If you are ever in the Kansas City area, check them out, and also, if you ever want to send us anything to review on the Comic Vault, you can always send that to our P.O. Box. That's Geekvolution, P.O. Box 4733, Overland Park, Kansas 66204. I am Captain Logan, and happy reading.